friends, welcome back to my channel. It is Tori, and today we are here to talk about all of the books that I read in the month of January. This was a great kickoff month to 2024, honestly. I feel like I got so much variety in my reading this month, which was great. I always love that. The first thing that I'm going to talk about here is the 4 volumes of manga that I read over the month of January, and those were volumes 3 through 6 of Spy X Family by Tatsuya Endo. I decided to go to my local library and pick up some volumes of a couple of random manga series just to taste test a few things, and it's been really fun. The one that really stuck out to me the most of the ones that I taste tested that I knew I wanted to continue first was Spy X Family. This one follows the story of Lloyd Forger, who is a super secret elite spy known as Twilight, and his mission in this series is to infiltrate a private academy that is like for the rich of the rich, the most elite, the brightest children, etc. The only problem with this is that he doesn't have a wife or a child, and he needs to acquire both of them in order for this infiltration to work. So he adopts a little girl. He finds himself in a marriage of convenience with a young woman named Yor, who, unbeknownst to Lloyd, is a master assassin. Now, none of this is spoiling anything because you literally find these things out in the first few pages of Volume 1. However, what ensues as the three of them try to kind of form and maintain this little dysfunctional family, which is adorable, all the while trying to infiltrate the elite academy with the daughter Anya. It's very funny. It's a very light thriller, so there are some action scenes, there are some of the spy mission type stuff, but that's pretty light in comparison to the kind of everyday life of an extremely dysfunctional family who is hiding a lot of secrets from each other, and it's just a really beautiful thing. There are some surprisingly deep moments in this series that really have hit me as a parent, and I've really loved it. It is a very bingeable series. I'm through 6 volumes already, and I am 100% ready to get the rest of the series and just finish it out. I believe, and I will have to double check this, I believe there are 6 more volumes, so I think there's a total of 12. But in any case, however many more there are, I am invested with this family. There are a couple nitpicky things about the series that I'm not a big fan of, but overall it's a great series and I'm really excited to keep going. I would also highly recommend this for somebody who is looking to try manga. I think it's a very light manga in terms of very easy to follow storytelling. The artwork is really engaging, and I don't think that it's like super complex in any way, so I do think that this would be a fantastic manga for somebody who might be new to manga and interested in reading something light and fun. Now let's talk about the audiobook that I listened to in January. Now, I have been trying really hard to pick audiobooks every once in a while to listen to because I do want to continue to grow my ability to pay attention to audiobooks. That is something that I do struggle with. And one of the things that I found this month was that the genre of memoir is actually a really easy sell for me when it comes to audiobooks. I really enjoy listening to people's stories in their own words, and when it's an audiobook, it just kind of adds that level of conversational quality that I really love about it. So I had a fantastic time with my audiobook this month, and I would highly recommend it. And I read Beyond the Wand by Tom Felton, who, if you don't know who that is, he played Draco Malfoy in the Harry Potter films. And this memoir I really enjoyed. I felt like throughout the entire story, Tom did a really great job of separating his character from his personal life, but also sharing all of the anecdotes that tied them together. And he shared a lot of really cool insight from the set of the films. He shared a lot about his co-workers on the films, and also had a lot of really down-to-earth life lessons that he's learned through a lot of trial and error and going through a lot of things in his life that were difficult. And especially at the end of the memoir, it took a little bit of a turn that I wasn't surprised by, but also wasn't really expecting. And I just feel like it's a really solid memoir for anybody who enjoys that genre. I really enjoyed it. It had a lot of nostalgia tied in with it because of the films and all of the stories that Tom shared from his younger years. and all of the anecdotes about the people that we all know and love that he worked with. It was definitely good timing because as I've started reading the Harry Potter series for the first time, it was kind of fun to have Tom's memoir kind of tucked in amongst those reads. I thought that that was kind of fun timing, so it just sort of added to the nostalgia vibes that I'm getting going back and reading the book series for the first time. Now let's talk about the fantasy that I read this month, and these were all novels that I read in physical format, and I read 5 of them, and there were some chonkers this month, and I'm actually kind of proud of myself for getting through all of them in a month. The first book that I finished this month is one that I have been working on for a while that I buddy read with Nico from Nico's Book Reviews. Definitely check out his channel in the links below. And that was Janny Wurt's To Ride Hell's Chasm. This is a fantasy standalone, and it was my first experience reading anything by Janny Wurts. Now, the first thing that I'm going to say about this book is it's an incredible fantasy standalone. For all of you guys who are complaining that fantasy does not have enough standalones, definitely put this one on your TBR. I have heard from everyone who has read Janny's work that she has incredibly rich prose. She has an insane command of the English language, and all of that is 100% true. When I went into this book, it's just a completely different vibe. This book has so much rich flavor to every sentence. It's very clear to me that Janny really focuses on every single word she places in every single sentence, and that the prose is something that really means a lot to her because that shines through this book so much. Now, one of the things that I will say sometimes trips me up with books like this that have richer or denser prose is that I feel like the characters kind of get lost within that prose. And that is something that I was amazed by in this book, because despite the nature of the prose, which is very rich, very beautiful, very intentional, I never felt like I lost the characters. And to me, that was huge. That's a huge win, because I do feel like oftentimes prose can bury characters, like I said. So the fact that I felt these characters so powerfully through that prose just to me shows what kind of a master wordsmith Janny is when it comes to writing fantasy. Now, at the beginning of this book, we have a Princess Anya of the Kingdom of Cecily who fails to show up at her betrothal banquet, sparking this kind of frantic search for her throughout the city and the surrounding areas. A captain of the lower guard, Captain Mikhail, shows up and is called in to participate in the hunt for the princess because obviously her safety is now in severe question. Now, Mikhail is our protagonist through the story. He is the character through which we mostly have the perspectives. There are a couple of other characters that do have perspectives as we go through the story, but largely, this is Mikhail's story. There's a lot of history that comes in behind the scenes. There's a lot of, you get the sense of the world having been lived in and you being just kind of dropped in the middle of what is happening, which is something I always appreciate in fantasy. Mikhail is a very interesting character, and he is someone who's a veteran of many different wars, and he is absolutely deadly, which is one of the reasons why he's been called in to find and potentially protect or save the Princess Anya. Now, in the backdrop to all of this, there is the threat of sorcery that is hampering the efforts to not only find but also protect Anya and the secrets that made her run in the first place. This book is very tense. One of the things that I think Janny does a really good job of in this story is ramping up that tension as we go through the book. For me personally, because I'm more of a character-focused reader, I loved the depth of the characters in this story. The themes every once in a while did get a little bit heavy-handed in a couple of spots for me. What I loved about this book was how Janny managed to so seamlessly weave together this really rich and beautiful prose with characters who felt very real and very front and center, and I thought that it all kind of came together in this really beautiful marriage of fantasy and tension, and it was really, really beautiful. So this was my first experience reading Janny Wurts. It definitely will not be the last. I'm looking forward to reading more of her work in the future. And overall, I just was really impressed by it. So if you are looking for a fantasy standalone, definitely put this one on your TBR. Next up, I had my first foray into the much beloved and well-known Discworld by Terry Pratchett. Terry Pratchett wrote so many novels in the Discworld universe that sometimes I think it can be difficult to know where to start, but the one that I was recommended more often than any other book in this particular universe of novels was Guards, Guards. This is book 1 of the Night Watch series, and it follows this kind of bumbling motley crew of Night Watch soldiers and their captain, Sam Vimes, as a dragon is summoned to their city. And this book, I honestly had no idea where I was going to land when it comes to the humor in these books, and I didn't know where I was going to land on it. And I am happy to report that I loved it. I absolutely loved it. One of the things that I think can trip up comedy when it comes to books is when it takes itself too seriously and isn't intelligent. It's just there, it's just like dumb humor. That's not something that I usually enjoy. Terry Pratchett's use of comedic timing and dialogue is brilliant. You can tell, you can read the intelligence behind the humor, and I loved it. He takes pot shots at so many aspects of the things we love in fantasy, the tropes, it's such a memeable book, honestly. There's so many characters and just events and things in this book that, as somebody who's a lifelong lover of fantasy, I laughed more in this book than I have for a long time in any other read, and it was just brilliant. I loved the characters. For those of you that have read this book, Carrot by far is my favorite. I loved Carrot. Carrot's hilarious, and I love him. Protect at all costs. This was such a great intro to the Discworld novels, and I definitely purchased book 2 in this particular series because I love these characters, and I'm really curious to see where they go from here. The one thing that I will say is that I would say the second half of the book, the pacing and the plot line felt a little muddied to me, but I cared so much about the characters and I still loved what was going on so much that I didn't really care. But I would highly recommend this to anybody, having only read it, obviously, so I don't have anything to compare it to, but as far as intros to Discworld go, this is a great one, you guys. I really loved this. I'm so glad that I finally got around to it. It's been on my TBR for ages, and highly recommend. I had a fantastic time with this book. Next up, I read my first ever book club pick for my Cosmic Footsteps book club that I've talked about on the channel for a couple of months now, where every month of the year of 2024, one of my goals is to read a pre-2000s fantasy novel written by a female author in the SFF genre. On my Patreon, my patrons are allowed to vote every single month on, I give them like 3 or 4 options, and they're allowed to vote on which book they think should be that month's feature. And for the month of January, they chose Daughter of the Forest by Juliette Marillier. Now, I did do a video for this book already that I would highly recommend you go and watch, because I did include a little brief bio about Juliette Marillier on that, as well as my thoughts about the book as a whole. But I gotta tell you what, this was a great kickoff for the Cosmic Footsteps book club. I loved this book. I loved this book. It was so beautiful in all of the ways that we love classic fantasy. Oh, it was so good. So you guys know I love me a motley crew, and also I love sibling and found family bonds. This book brings the absolute best of the combination of those two things front and center. We have Sorsha, who is the 7th child of a lord in a historical fantasy world based on Celtic mythology, and all of her older siblings are brothers. Now, when a enchantress comes to her father's land and places a curse on her family, Sorsha is the only one who can erase it. Now, this story is heavy. I expected it to be heavy going into it because of some of the things I'd heard about it. There are some things in here that are very difficult to read. That being said, I am so impressed when authors can handle really heavy topics in their novels with a sense of grace and respect. And I felt like Juliette really, really pulled that off in the best way with this book. I loved Sorsha as a protagonist. I loved her motley crew of 6 older brothers. They all felt like they had their own individuality, which is something in a motley crew that I always look for. I'm like, don't just throw a bunch of characters together, make me care about each one individually, and I just think she did a fantastic job about that. It is a coming of age story. It is a very dark, kind of Grimm's fairy tale vibes coming of age story, and because of that, there's a lot of really hard things that our characters go through in this story, but the growth that we see in Sorcia's character throughout the book and the choices that she makes and the things that she overcomes were just so beautifully written. I got very emotional several times during this book, and I honestly cannot wait to reread it. It's one of those books where I put down, and the next day I was like, man, I'd love to just reread that right now. Next up is a book that we kind of did an impromptu read-along that we started in my private Discord early January, and it was hosted by myself, my friend John Morrow, and my friend Kay from Kay's Hidden Shelf. And we decided that we were going to read the Empires of Dust trilogy by Anna Smith Spark. And the first one is The Court of Broken Knives. Now, I had never read anything by Anna Smith Spark going into this, and I knew that it was very grimdark. That was the only thing I knew about it, and I knew that a lot of people talked about Anna Smith Spark's prose. So in this book, Anna Smith Spark, you can tell she's a poet. She writes like a poet. The words and the sentences are very, not stream of consciousness, but they almost have that kind of free-flowing poetic feel as you go through the paragraphs. And the thing for me that is a little bit difficult with that is this was a case where I felt like the characters did get lost in that prose, and I just didn't connect or invest in any of the characters throughout the story. I think there were some scenes in here that are really, really poignant and really beautifully written. She has some amazing moments of impact in the prose that I really love that I had to stop and go back and read. For me personally, this just wasn't a good fit for me. The grimdark, the tone of grimdark in this book specifically, I've read grimdark before, so it's not like I don't know what to expect when it comes to grimdark, and it's not the content itself. I think it's just the tone of the story, and I just didn't connect with it. I really had a hard time with this, especially the second half of this book. I don't know if I personally am going to be continuing this trilogy, but I can definitely understand how people who love that really lyrical, poetic prose would absolutely love this story. Last but not least, in the month of January, I finally got to a book on my shelf that has been on my TBR for a long time. It's pretty much been on my TBR since I came back to BookTube and got started in the indie fantasy scene, and I am still to this day kind of shocked it took me this long to read it. Apologies, I know there were a lot of people that were waiting for me to read this book. That is Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Long. This is the story of kind of two main protagonists in the story are Misaki and her son Mamoru, who live in a heavily Japanese-inspired fantasy world, and they are from a very proud and ancient culture of warriors. Now, Misaki, who is a mother of multiple children, has kind of put her warrior days to rest in order to raise her family and to be the dutiful wife, while her son Mamoru, who is about 15 years old, is kind of in his coming-of-age years at this school where he is learning to be a fighter worthy of the legends of his ancestors. There's so many things. Like, I want to do a full review for this book because I have a lot of things to say about it. My overall opinion is that the impact overall of this book is phenomenal. It's incredible. There are some parts of this book that resonated so deeply with me on a personal level as a mother, as somebody who deals with mental illness, and I think that M.L. Long handles those topics in a way that, in my opinion, is some of the best I've ever seen. I completely understand why this book is so beloved. It's incredible, honestly. The scenes, especially between Mamoru and Misaki as mother and son, the twists and turns in this book, I just wow, like literally wow. It's incredible. The one probably complaint that I had with it was that one of the kind of backstory lines that was fit into the book really felt like I was reading two different books, and I didn't feel like it was integrated as well as I would have liked to have seen it. But honestly, overall, I feel like that's really my only complaint. ML Long packed so many really deep topics into this book and somehow managed to pull them all off. Super impressed, honestly. I'm super impressed. So this is another book that I definitely can see myself rereading, and I am not sad at all that I decided to back the Kickstarter for the special edition of this without ever having read it, because that was a good payoff, and I can completely see why everybody was so excited for me to read this. I loved it. That's what I got. I loved it. And I'm hoping to film a video soon where I talk about my thoughts on it in more detail, but overall, definitely loved it. 100% would reread. So anyways, that is my reads for the month of January, and man, that was a good month, you guys. Like, I feel really good about that kickoff to the year. I feel like I got a good start on some of the books that I've been wanting to get to for a while. I've been wanting to read Sword of Kaigen for ages. I've been wanting to read Guards for ages. I've been wanting to finish Janny Wirtz. Had a great time with the first Cosmic Footsteps book club read. It was just a good month, you guys. It was a really good month. So I mean, February has some big shoes to fill, but we'll see how it goes. I'm really excited about some of the reads I have coming up here in the month of February. I would love to know down in the comments below, what was your favorite book you read this month? How did you feel about it? Tell me. I would love to know. I hope you guys are all having a great week. I hope you are reading 5-star reads, and I will see you in the next video.